Chapter 5. Many mistakenly believe there is a winner and a loser when the battle ends. Often, the outcome is decided long before the first sword is drawn. Cleric Jorn, Advanced Courtier in Military Tactics, Volume 2. In his quarters, Stefan stopped pacing when he realized lunch had not been served. In the keep, he did not need the sundial, oil lamp, candle clock, or the other weak attempts at mechanical devices to measure the day. Appointments, meetings, or any scheduled event occurred according to meals. Dale chefs had mastered quality and service just as efficiently as the king's army. So when lunchtime came and passed with no one knocking on his door, Stefan sat on the side of his bed with a sinking weight in the pit of his stomach. Something happened. No one had delivered a missive, a letter, or even a whisper. His entire network had gone silent. Even after the hibernation command, he had expected to receive some word. Taking a deep breath and slowly releasing it through his mouth, Stefan pivoted his strategies for the worst scenario. He never thought he would have to put these plans into motion, but at least he had plans. Stefan walked to his desk and squatted before it. Reaching his hand underneath and along the left side, he found the tiny knob. With a series of turns, a panel loosened under the knob, and Stefan removed the panel and extracted the papers from the hidden compartment. Stefan carefully replaced the panel and secured it before taking his seat and reviewing his previous work. Concerned for lost time, he quickly added a few extra notes with his quill and sealed the letters. Stefan stepped over to the cold fireplace in his quarters. A wrinkle creased his forehead as he sought the correct spot, with fingers surveying the gritty and soot-covered wall. When a piece wiggled, Stefan pressed harder, and a rectangular metal chute opened. He deposited the letters, closed the chute lid, and washed his hands at the washbowl near his bed. His servants would assume he had been messy with his inkpot, which would explain the residual black water. He always tried to be one step ahead. An easy breath flowed from him, and Stefan took a seat in his leather-cushioned chair by the window. His hands trembled at having to take such measures to protect his holdings, but he rejoiced in having prepared. Nothing short of the god of Courtier, Loham, could tear down his little empire. A quarter of an hour later, his door burst open. 6 quon guards piled into the room, and Stefan held up his hands. Relief filled his heart. His father was alive. No one else would take such measures against him. "Qual Stefan, Quon Derringer demands your presence," said a guard. "Excellent. I just need to make a quick stop to the toilet." "Now." "Okay, then," Stefan replied while they flanked him and proceeded to the exit. In the halls, servants milled about, but they hushed as he passed, escorted by the guards. The entire keep already knew more than he did. The guards led him down the main staircase to the 3rd floor. Peeking over the banister, dozens of nobles ran about to various small groups in the foyer. Stefan corrected himself. Most of the city knew more than he did. Upon reaching his father's office, a guard rapped on the door, and a muffled, "Enter," responded. Stefan swallowed and took a deep breath before stepping into the room. Quon Derringer, in his chainmail cuirass with a blood-red tabard bordered with white trim, did not look up as he signed a parchment at his desk. The lead guard, Stefan didn't bother with their inferior titles, pointed to a cushioned chair before his father's desk. Stefan sat. No matter what trouble he found himself in, the guards would not dare touch him. The quon looked up at the guards and then the door, after he finished signing a document. The soldiers hurried out, carefully closing the door. Stefan could hear them shuffle into formation outside. They did not leave. In a flowing carmine velvet dress, Stefan's mother, Quoness Esrialda, sat on a cushioned wooden bench against the wall. Her folded arms and pressed lips confirmed the severity of his situation. Quon Derringer finally looked up at him. Stefan knew better than to stare back and cast his gaze down. The quon asked, "Why did you threaten Khal Gerol?" Stefan never tried to manipulate his father. Nothing ever got past the man. He was competing against my supply venture for the king's army. Wine wasn't enough. The quon's hand curled into a fist. You have thousands in gold. Thousands. Why is that not good enough for a 17-year-old who hasn't finished his basic studies? Stefan held back his quick retort. Every word would fashion his punishment. Should I respond, my liege? Oh, yes. Stefan didn't cringe, but he wanted to. Quon, I have finished basic studies. I haven't had a tutor in over 2 years. Quon Derringer glanced at his wife. She spoke with an even tone. He completed the program 3 years ago. The tutors barely did anything for him. You gave him permission to pursue the business. He finished with the military history tutor as well. Every single war since the first cleric, Jaito, founded the country. So many books. Completely. Derringer turned on his son. Impressive. But answer the question. Why isn't being rich good enough? Are you that consumed by greed? Stefan tried to keep his face passive, but failed. Do you really have to ask why the 5th son of a quon needs to fight for his future? I decide your future. Stefan bit his tongue, which was about to get him in worse trouble. I know you're smart. Up to this point, your exploits impressed me. My son, the bear. You're the smartest kid I've got. But if you're so smart, why did you threaten this noble? Stefan looked down at his hands. Honesty was the only route here. I wanted more. The quon stood and began pacing behind his desk. I won't thank you for being honest. I know you've calculated your odds here. What you don't know is that your sister was almost abducted this morning by one of Gerol's lackeys. Stefan's eyebrows shot up. Derringer's voice simmered with anger. He tried to assassinate me, Stefan. The quon slammed his hands down on the desk and yelled, I have the Khal and the assassin in my dungeon right now, spilling every single detail. The only reason I'm not dead and your mother isn't paying ransom for your sister is because a boy, a peasant, saved our lives. The quon stalked around his desk and to Stefan's chair, lowering his voice. The dagger missed my head by 2 inches. The quon leaned over and whispered, He tried to kill me, boy. Now, do you think your stunt was wise? No, my quon, Stefan whispered. What was that? Stefan cleared his throat and repeated, No, my quon. Quon Derringer straightened. Gerol sobbed that his intention was only to capture the girl to use against you. He paused. He begged for mercy and said that he didn't know I would be riding with her. Stefan couldn't swallow past the lump in his throat. His father continued. Of course, I do not believe him, and he will stand trial. The assassin claims there was a female messenger who informed him of Gerol's orders. Without explicit evidence, I cannot hang the son of a couve. I cannot even hang this anvil without the king's permission. He sat down, tapping his desk. Do you understand the position I am in? Do you understand the ramifications of what's happened? Do you know what you have done? Stefan kept his eyes down. He had never seen his father this angry. He knew better than to say a word. What do you have to say? Stefan cringed. I'm sorry. I didn't what? Consider the possibilities? You are smart when you have the right information. You are unbeatable at that chain game you play with your brother. But with people and emotions, books will only help you so much. Stefan kept his head down. This was going to be brutal. This is not how we raised you. I may not be a holy man, but you know the faith. You know right from wrong. You failed. The quon paused for an entire minute as he shared a look with the quoness. I am stripping it all away. The wine, the gold, the investments. Stefan caught his breath. Everything? As for what to do with you, I want to discuss it with your mother. The quon leaned back in his chair. Well? Stefan waited a moment to ensure he didn't sound impertinent. I'm very sorry. I would never want anything bad to happen to you or the family. You've said it well. I didn't understand. I would beg your permission to settle the businesses personally, as there are men and women whose livelihood and families depend on those jobs. That is impressive. I want to believe your sincerity, but I also know what you, the bear, did to hard-working wine merchants in my city behind my back. I will let you close things up, but you will not leave the keep. Stefan nodded. He expected that much. No. You do not understand. I know of your little network. I have rounded them all up. The older ones are being kicked out of Dale as we speak, and your cubs have been returned to the orphanages. You will not fart without me knowing. Now what do you have to say? Stefan swallowed the lump. He wanted to know. How is Adil? Impressive, Esrielda. He actually thought of someone other than himself. Adil's head hurts, and she is scared. You could learn a lot from this Pol who saved her. He put both her and me before himself. Very good, my quon. A peasant saved them. I won't send you to the dungeon this time. Go to your new quarters and await instruction. New quarters? The dungeon might be better. Stefan stood and approached his mother. I'm sorry, Mother. He presented his face to her with eyes closed. After an interminable moment, the crack of her hand against his cheek almost sent him to the floor. With his cheek stinging, he gave a small bow to each parent and opened the door. The guards guided him up the stairs to the 6th and top floor. Voices from the foyer below continued to follow him as he ascended. The lead guard did not even open up the door for him. Stefan entered, and they slammed the door behind him. The simple guest bedroom usually housed a lesser visiting noble, but Stefan pushed aside the inconvenience. The guilt of putting his family in danger humiliated him. He had underestimated Garol, and the consequences had almost cost lives. The worst was that he owed a peasant for those lives. Quoness Esrielda unfolded her arms. What will you do? Quon Derringer sighed. I cannot fault the kid for wanting to get ahead. Loham knows how smart he is. There is no way I could have done what he has done by 17. But he crossed a line, and I have no choice but to make an example of him. So, military. No, Derringer, our son. The quon reached down and opened a low drawer in his desk. He pulled out a crimson envelope and blew the dust off it. King Sershin, the previous king of Cordier, had signed these documents 6 years before, and his son, King Strong, had also signed the orders a few years ago. Stefan would have made a great quon. He gently laid the envelope on his desk. There must be consequences. His current path will lead to destruction, and not just his. I know. This could have been much worse. Still. Yes. He is my son, and I have a responsibility to guide him that I have been neglecting. I thought allowing him the freedom to run his business would bring maturity with responsibility. I have failed him. He began writing on special yellow parchment. I do not trust Stefan to the academy. He would own that weak establishment in a year. I have an acquaintance who will educate the boy in ways I cannot. Who? Someone here in Dale? Ariel? He stopped writing. No. Do you remember General Granite? The one who publicly defied King Sershin? Wasn't he decommissioned? No. He was reassigned. Reassigned? The military is bad enough, but apprenticed to a disgraced officer. Why? The quoness asked. Because Granite owes me a favor. Pol pushed himself up in his infirmary bed, careful to move slowly and avoid aggravating his injuries. His hands and his right leg burned under the dressings placed by the nurse when he first arrived. The bleeding had stopped, but the wounds ached. He had never had such fine treatment in his life. A bed. A real bed. The nurse explained the infirmary served anyone in the keep, from the quon to the stable boy. A row of beds, not just linens on the ground or cots, ran along either wall of the long room. Reaching the ceiling, oak cabinets with medical supplies lined the far wall to his left, and the only entrance lay to his right. Afternoon sunlight streamed in through the open windows with white, billowing curtains. The fine furnishings were surreal but beautiful, and he could enjoy them alone, which itself was a luxury. No one else shared the infirmary. For a moment, he had peace. Wincing from soreness, Pol swung his feet over the bedside. A tray of food on a raised wooden table beside his bed had motivated him to risk aggravating his wounds. Slowly lifting the gleaming silver cover, Pol's jaw dropped. Pork tenderloin with rich brown gravy bordered mashed blue tubers. A small house constructed from asparagus with carrot shreds forming the roof adorned the plate. Pol gave thanks to Loham, and with the same skill required to use a sword, he focused on keeping the fork in his bandaged right hand. The pork tenderloin melted in his mouth, and he did not even care about the gravy running down his chin from the mashed blue tubers. He paused before picking apart the small house constructed from vegetables, wondering if he should eat the creation. The rumors that the Dale Quon chef was one of the best in the country were to be believed. He regretted the pain in his jaw with each bite, but the rush of flavor made up for the discomfort. After savouring the last bite, Pol pushed the small wooden table to the side and tested his right leg. Pain seared up his thigh and into his hip. He eased back down on the bedside and shook his head. Why did I do this again? Why did I fight for a noble and his daughter? Pol snorted. Status had nothing to do with a young woman being assaulted. Pol wouldn't have let that happen to anyone. His father had taught him better. His uncle had taught him better. But a poor kid who had received more than one beating at the hand of a noble had some reservations. Pol was 8 years old when a noble gave him his first beating. His father had a long-time client, lineage, who had a son the same age as Pol. Father would bring Pol to their residence while he worked on the lineage's shoes. Pol would play with Yulchian while his father worked. The boys had played ball and had many adventures throughout the Lear's home, but Yulchian never came to Pol's home. During one visit at the Lear's residence, Yulchian had wanted to play servant and noble. Pol had to be the servant. When Pol had failed to cook some imaginary food that Yulchian liked, Yulchian had slapped him across the face. Pol had thought they were playing a game, and punched Yulchian. Lineage, Yulchian's father, taught Pol the difference between noble and commoner for the black eye Yulchian had received. The Lear beat Pol almost unconscious before his father intervened and rescued Pol. Leor had lost the Lear's favour. Then, the Lear's friends dropped his father's business as well. His father had saved him, but had been punished. That always stuck with Pol. The infirmary door creaked open, and his father and Uncle Ish pushed through. Ish smiled at seeing Pol. "There's the boy!" They entered and strolled past the other beds, stopping at Pol's. His father lifted Pol's right hand. "Well?" Pol winced at the movement. "Cut up pretty good. I can move my fingers, and there's still a feeling, but my hands are swollen. Don't know if I broke my right hand," Pol said. Ish said, "You were pounding on a leather curious, boy, and that man's face wasn't a pillow." Leor and Pol smiled. Uncle had a point. Ish continued, "How's the leg?" "Having trouble putting weight on it. Bleeding stopped when I got here." His father examined the bandage. "Someone cleaned these up real nice." "There was a nurse who did that, but I'm waiting for the cleric to return." Why did his father seem more concerned now? "What about earlier that morning?" "I see." "Feeling better? Eat well?" Leor asked. Pol held back a retort and told himself he should be grateful for his father's concern. "Yes, sir. I've never eaten food like that before." "Pol, your father's just asking after you. We're all concerned. You don't have to be suspicious." Ish always could read him better than his father, but, to be fair, Ish had spent more time with Pol. "Yes, sir. Speaking of family, will the quon really protect our family?" Leor whipped his head to Ish with an uneasy look. Ish said, "All we can do is trust. You protected his family. Maybe this is what we've been waiting for." "The quon knows." His father's face flushed, and Pol winced, having only seen his father react like that once before. They had repaired furniture in the shop for months afterward. Leor found his voice. "Why? Why would you ruin my family?" Anger building, Pol spoke up. "Quon Derringer said we were safe. He said that. Told the Quon guard to make sure of it." "How many people did you tell, Ish?" His father's voice raised. "Pol did a great thing. The family should get the credit." Quon Deringer's a hard man, but he's just. This is what we've been waiting for, Leor. That's up for debate, but I wasn't included. Leor paced down the line of beds. This is my family, Ish. Pol held his breath. He couldn't believe this conversation was happening within his hearing. Ish drew himself up. It's our family. Centuries of our family. It's not about you. How many Vroshan have suffered? How many of our ancestors died to keep the traditions, protecting a country that hates us? He dropped his hands. Vroshan had the foresight. His predictions came true. The noble class has failed the country. They failed us. I won't bury our name. I won't bury the blood, sweat and tears our ancestors poured into this family. Pol had heard that argument many times from his uncle, and it resonated with his heart. Leor responded with an even tone. It's a choice we're all given. Vroshan gave that choice to both of his sons. Father gave me the choice. I gave Pol the choice. It's a gift, not a command. I chose to keep the name out of respect for our father. I chose to let my son train with you. If I'm going to reveal our name and face the risks, that's my choice, not yours. No matter how noble. Ish stared Leor down, but after a moment, Ish released his clenched fists. Pol's father had a good point, and Pol allowed the thought to sink into his heart. His father had allowed him to make choices. He didn't have to. You're right, Ish sighed. You're right. I apologize, Leor. I should have given Pol the chance to reveal it. In my defense, how else was I going to explain how a 16-year-old took down an assassin, a bad one, but still? Doesn't matter. Apology accepted. I just hope Quon Deringer meant what he said. Pol exhaled. Previous arguments about their blessed heritage had not ended so peacefully. A small knock at the door interrupted, and Ish called out, "Come in." Quel Adil entered, and stole Pol's breath. Her fine brown hair had been redone with a blue ribbon. A large bruise had developed over her left cheek. She wore a light blue dress with matching shoes and carried herself with more grace than any other girl Pol knew. He glanced down at his chest and silently thanked the nurse who had given him a white tunic. Adil must have caught the glance as a small pink bloom filled her cheeks. But she recovered quickly as she stopped by his bed. "Good afternoon. I came down to see how you're doing." "Hi. I'm fine." His brain suddenly decided to not function. Adil said, "Oh, well, I wanted to thank you. I'm scared to think what might have happened if you had not been there today." Pol hadn't thought that far ahead. Someone had wanted to steal this girl for a reason. A nobleman's daughter was a valuable commodity. Why did he get mixed up in this? Was he taking a long time to respond? Ish stepped in. "We are so glad you are safe, Quel." Pol nodded emphatically. Quel Adil said, "Thank you. You're Pol's uncle. It is Pol, right?" Pol needed to talk and not just nod. "Yes, this is my uncle, Ish, and my father, Leor." Adil gave a slight nod before returning her attention to Pol. He considered that facing another assassin might be easier. "Talking? More talking?" How's the quon?" "Thank you for asking. He is doing well. He is angry at my brother, but he was not injured," Adil said. "Your brother?" Pol asked. "I don't know the details, but my older brother Stefan is partially responsible for the attack. Quite embarrassing. Papa will take care of him. She stepped forward. Pol, I also came to ask you a favor. Pol swallowed past his dry throat. Okay, Adil said. My father will host a small dinner tomorrow night in your honor. Would you be willing to return to Dale Keep? Ish smiled, and his father's eyes widened. Pol checked his mouth. His immediate reaction was to say yes. But come back to Quon Keep filled with lords and ladies? He would prefer to go another round with the assassin. Still, he would get to see Adil again. He was taking too long again. I'd enjoy that. Thank you for offering. Ish elbowed his arm. Quell. She smiled. Excellent. Pol's heart steeled itself against that beautiful smile for 2 full seconds, before returning a lopsided smile. She was beautiful, even if she was a noble. Adil grinned. In embarrassment, Pol shifted his position, and the pain in his thigh flared. Adil's face softened at his grimace. I'm so sorry Cleric Rian is late. He was on the other side of the city. With a bow, his father said, The Quell is most kind. Pol refrained from rolling his eyes. His father did not need to pander. The infirmary door burst open, and a portly cleric rolled down the aisle. Who's talking about me? He asked, scanning each person. After a bow to Quell Adil, he fixed his attention on Pol. Ah, the hero! Without preamble, the cleric pulled off the leg dressing, with fresh, bright red blood oozing. Pol winced at the rough handling. Weren't clerics supposed to be gentle? He pulled the edges of the puncture open and examined the wound. Cleaned out well. No bone involvement. You'll have to come back in a few days to have the dressing changed. Have you ever been healed by Loam before? No, sir. I'm Cleric Rian, not an officer. You say, No, Master Rian, or Cleric Rian. Yes, sir, Cleric Rian. He wasn't about to say Master. Let me explain how this works, because some people think it's Mandra or my own special powers, but that's not the case. Cleric Rian rolled up his sleeves. I'm going to pray, and I'm going to ask Loam to heal you. With this blessing, you may heal quicker depending on Loam's will. I have no control in that regard. Understand? Yes, Cleric Rian. Don't be upset if he doesn't heal as quickly as you expect. Loam's will is not our own. Cleric Rian placed both hands over the wound and pressed. Pol gritted his teeth. Did the man need to push on his wound to pray? His father, uncle, and Adil bowed their heads. Cleric Rian began the traditional healing prayer. Then he not so gently grabbed Pol's hands and repeated the prayer. Pol considered himself faithful, and while he had heard of the power of clerics, he questioned the man's abilities. There was no golden light, or strange visions like he had expected from his uncle's war stories. Still seated, his wounds did not feel different. Pol sighed. He assumed Loam wanted him to hurt for a bit. The cleric clapped him on the back. "You're ready now, son?" "Not quite," replied Quon Derringer as he entered and approached. Everyone except Pol bowed. Pol dipped his head a little when he noticed the others. The Quon had changed into a chainmail curious, with a red tabard bordered with white rim. Stern black eyes held Pol's gaze as Cleric Rian stepped aside for the Quon, who asked, "So, what can I do to repay you, young man?" "How do you feel about your daughter's hand in marriage?" Pol thought. "Thank you for the healing and the food. Nothing more, Quon." The Quon examined Pol's bandages. "Is that so?" He looked at Leor. "So you're the young man's father." "Leor, Your Grace," his father replied with a bow. "Is it true your surname is Vroshan?" Leor glanced at Pol and then Ish. "Yes, Your Grace." "I understand why you are concerned. Be not afraid. I have only respect for your blessed lineage." Cleric Rian lifted his eyebrows. "Vroshan? The Vroshan family! Well, that explains things." Leor dipped his head. "Without offending, Master Rian, Quelladil, or Your Grace, we beg secrecy in this matter. While those present may be accommodating, others may not." "Well said. I give you my word that your family will be under my protection. That brings me to why I'm here," Quon Derringer replied. "Pol, you provided a great service to us today. How can I repay you?" Pol's mind went blank again. Uncle Ish chuckled. "Come on, boy. Speak up." Quon added, "Just ask, Pol." Leor's gaze bored into Pol, and he knew what his father would ask for. Pol glanced at Adil for a second, and his heart fluttered as their eyes met. His uncle chuckled again. No, Pol knew what he wanted to ask for. "Sir, I just want to be an officer in the king's army. That's what my ancestor aspires to. That's our duty." "Pol!" his father exclaimed with a glance at the Quon. "Pol," Uncle Ish said softly, "I was going to keep it a surprise, but I was going to pay for you to go to the academy. Ask for something else." "Let me understand," Quon Derringer said. "You could ask for anything, and you want to become an officer in the king's army." Pol did not have to reconsider. "You know about my ancestors. You know I have an obligation to this country. I've wanted it for years, but not with my uncle's money." "I'm willing to offer you more, Pol. Crowns, or a title," Quon Derringer cried. "Pol, consider your family," his father pleaded. "I am. Vroshan himself chose the same. He never wanted the title or money. He only wanted to serve. Why do you think I've been training all this time? Why did you let me train?" Leor closed his eyes. "Because my father would have wanted it." He dropped his head and sighed. "It's your choice." Quon Derringer regarded Pol silently for a moment. "You are a credit to your parents and uncle. I will not forget this." He folded his hands together. "I respect your choice, Pol, but I can't send you to the academy." "But you—" The Quon raised a hand. "You will receive training, but it will be with someone I trust. You're too valuable to send to the academy." It took Pol a second to register the response. Too valuable? "Your Grace?" Ish asked. The Quon grinned at Uncle Ish. "Adil, did Pol accept the invitation?" "Yes, Papa." "Splendid. Son, I'll see you tomorrow night. Would you bring your family?" Pol took a turn being surprised. "Yes, sir, thank you." Leor beamed and bowed. "Your Grace is most kind." "No, this boy was kind in sacrificing himself. This is the least I can do. For now." He held an arm out to his daughter, who took it gracefully and gave Pol a quick glance. Pol returned the look with a smile. After she left through the door, the cleric secured the bandage around his leg. Pol's limb screamed in agony, and he brought his hand down to push the man away. Cleric Rian caught his arm. "Pol, When you come tomorrow, address the quon as Quon or Your Grace. Got it? Yes, sir. Cleric Rian smacked the side of his head. Pol rubbed his scalp. He had little interaction with clerics, but this one was brutal. Yes, Cleric Rian. Ish chuckled and helped Pol to his feet. Obey the cleric, Pol. Yes, sir. Pol could stand. The leg still hurt, but he could put weight on it. Maybe Loam had healed him. Pol decided that any help was appreciated, and he would take time to thank Loam. Cleric Rian said, Time to go. Carriage is waiting. Pol was about to shake his head, and the cleric caught the pause. The quon won't take no for an answer. Pol resigned himself to another reason to owe the quon. With his uncle's assistance, he limped out of the infirmary and into the keep proper. Pol couldn't help but notice all the people in the hallway and foyer who had stopped to stare at him. Some looked to be servants, and others had gleaming brooches, but they all stared at him and whispered. Uncle, what's wrong? Pol asked, nodding to the crowd. Word gets around. It's not every day a kid prevents the assassination of the quon. Am I in trouble? Pol didn't enjoy drawing this kind of attention. No, you're popular, but some consider that to be trouble.